If you have been doing more and it's not been compounding, today, this is where we'll figure out why. Not guessing, not opinions. We're going to make the system visible. So, scaling activity before diagnosis scales distortion. This is why we always want to diagnose before we deploy. Now, the first thing we want to know, or we want to understand and review, is that revenue flows through four structural domains. And even though it flows through four structural domains, demand, conversion, capacity, and cash, there is one domain where the constraint originates, and that is the primary domain. The next thing we want to understand is that revenue flow alone is not enough. We have to understand that revenue can move, but constraints can still remain hidden, invisible. And the visible symptom is inconsistent pipeline. The actual constraint is a non-compounding signal. Now, before we get into the deep dive, the other thing we want to look at is the actual system. Where does the work happen? So when you identify the constraint, how do you know where to go to fix it? That's where the revenue system comes in. And that's where the streamline and scale operating grid acts to give direction to where the work happens. So spotlight, offer, activate, and retain are those quadrants, and they align with the structural domains. This is where the founder can understand the flow of revenue. You can see the constraints, and also you can identify those areas that make it dangerous to scale without fixing. Now, as I mentioned, the workflows underneath the four structural domains. So demand aligns with spotlight, the spotlight quadrant. Conversion aligns with the offer quadrant, where that work gets done. Capacity work gets done in the activate quadrant, and cash work gets done in retain. Okay. So the constraints exist, the primary constraint exists in one domain at a time, and that domain is the primary domain. That's important. Now, how we diagnose the constraint. First, we look at the pattern. So we have a pattern that we're looking at today. We look at the pattern. The pattern tells us where in the revenue system is the work happening. So in this case, we're working on demand domain. That the work of that happens in Spotlight. Once we locate it, we look at the signals and metrics aligned with the work in that area, and then we confirm the constraint. And once we confirm the constraint, then we resolve it. Okay. Now, today, we're deep diving on signal dispersion. This is a demand domain distortion that happens in, and the work for that happens in the spotlight quadrant. So in this case, activity is happening across multiple channels, but the signal doesn't get enough repetition to actually compound. So it's like you're restarting every time. You're not building the recognition that you like to build. The symptoms of signal dispersion are as follows. The lead activity is spread among channels. So you're on LinkedIn, you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you're on, X, right? But no channel consistently produces inbound. So you're all over and you're posting, but you're not getting anything back in. The engagement appears and then fades. You're kind of there. You hit one lucky break, and then and then nothing. And then the pipeline feels inconsistently. So inbound resets instead of compounds. We want compounding. We want our work to build over time, right? The signal breakdown looks like you're posting across platforms, you're switching channels when the traction slows down. So you're like, oh, there's not enough activity over here. I'm going to switch over here. You're launching outreach bursts and then pausing. So not consistent. Testing instead of reinforcing. And then you're restarting visibility instead of compounding, right? So you're always testing to see, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen, but you're not optimizing the work that you're already doing, so it compounds, and then it winds up that you are resetting every single time. Now, the mechanism, what happens here that causes this dispersion is the fragmented signal. So, and low repetition density. In other words, and you'll see later in the examples, but your signal is going in multiple different places and you're not really getting a lot of traction in any of them, right? And so it's non-compounding conversation flow, because we know that conversations are what converts to actual clients, right? So as we do, because this is the proof layer, we have a structural scenario. So we have a founder-led B2B revenue or service agency, 150,000 a month target revenue, average deal size 25,000, close rate 30%, sales cycle 30 days, and you are on LinkedIn, you've got email going, you've got outbound and referrals, okay? Now, what's required? What do we need to happen so that we have compounding, right? So we've got this target revenue, and our deal size tells us that we need 6 deals a month. So at a 30% close rate, if we need 6 deals a month, we need on average 20 conversations a month. So if we need 20 conversations a month, we want 70% of our volume to produce those conversations. So 14, the dominant source, we want the dominant source to provide 70% of those conversations, okay? So 14 from at least one of those channels, okay? And this requires 5 to 7 touches of a potential person during that time, on that channel, on that primary channel. If that makes sense. Now, this is what the actual behavior looks like. You actually have 3 to 7 deals a month, which is aligned. Conversations 10 to 25 a month. That's aligned with what we said we required. But here now, look at the channel distribution. So we're on 4 channels. 25% of our content goes on each one of those 4 channels. So the repetition midpoint, we need 6, and we actually 6 repetition, 6 points where we are touching and we're repeating and we're able to establish our actual content on that platform. And we're actually at 1.5 each, right? So we have a deficit of 75% of repetition that we want to see on a single platform. Okay, so how do we get here? We look at this and we say, well, we've got more activity, we're on more channels, but it's not generating the results that we're looking for, right? So being action oriented as we are as founders, we take action. And so what we conclude is, okay, well, we must need to do more. We must need more channels. We must need more content or a better platform, right? And so we respond by adding channels, increasing activity, switching direction sometime, which restarts visibility, and we lose traction that way. But this is what we saw, and so we took that action. So when we look at the response we took, more channels, more content, more outreach, more testing, that's not aligned with the actual origin of the signal dispersion. The origin is because we have a fragmented channel. We have fragmented channel focus. We've got 4 channels where we're only distributing 25% or 1.5 touches per channel. We have low repetition density. So because we're spreading across 4, right, we're not getting the same density. The audience attention is diluted, and the signal is resetting across platforms. So you're deploying based on the misdiagnosis, but the constraint lives over here in demand. Now, quantifying the consequences of the misdiagnosis. So the actual deal range is 3 to 7 per month. We established that. So the revenue for that, if we get 3 deals, it's 75,000. If we get 7 deals, it's 175,000. So we're looking at $100,000 monthly swing in revenue against our target of a 150,000. On a low month, we've got we're 75,000 below our target. On a high month, we're 25,000 above our target. So there's lots of fluctuation versus predictability, which is what we're looking for. Now, let's look at the baseline. So we need 20 conversations, 14 from a dominant source, 5 to 7 touches per prospect. What we actually do is we have 10 to 25 conversations per month, but there's only 25% of those conversations happen in a single channel. So we're only generating about 1 to 2 touches with a prospect per channel. So the issue is not activity. You can see the activity is consistent. And in fact, the actual is more activity. The issue is the signal is not accumulating. So let's look at 2 paths. So the first thing you could do is you could say, you know what? I'm just going with it. And you scale the existing structure. So 4 channels, 25% on each, 1 to 2 touches per prospect. And you attempt to scale by adding more content, adding more channels, adding more outreach, posting frequency increases. But even with the improved activity, now you're only up to 3 touches per channel. But the structure stays dispersed against 4 channels, right? So you did all that extra work, but you're still not at the 6 to 7 touches per prospect that you need to hit your revenue target. So the result is the touch volume increased. The signal still resets across platforms. Your scaled activity gives you 3 touches, which is more than before, but you still have a gap of 2 to 4 touches per prospect that's not filled. So more activity can reduce the gap without fixing the structure. The path B is we can fix the constraint. This is what we're looking for, right? We fix the signal constraint, the signal structure first. So we have a baseline, 4 channels, 25% on each channel. But we corrected that structure with 1 dominant signal path, and we allocated 70% of our work to that 1 channel, and we optimized for 5 to 7 touches per prospect. Same effort is redirected to a single dominant channel. Okay, Instead of spreading activity evenly, the system reinforces one path long enough to establish a density for recognition to build. The result is more repetition, more recognition, more stable conversation flow. The goal is not signal everywhere. The goal is enough signal somewhere. So let's look at the comparative outcomes. Same founder effort, different structure. So on path A, 4 channels, 25% each. We scaled, we're still at 3 touches per channel. We have more activity, but we're still below our 5 to 7 touches that we need, and we have no dominant signal path. Path B, we concentrated the signal. We shifted the focus from those other 3 channels, consolidated it into one for 70% concentration. We hit our 5 to 7 touches that we need, and the result is that the repetition reaches its threshold, which is what we were looking for. The recognition has room to build. So now you're exposing yourself to you're exposing your thinking at a level of density where people actually know who you are, what you stand for, and then the conversation flow can stabilize from there. Scaling activity improves motion. Changing structure improves compounding. Structure changes the result, the outcome, before effort. Now, we said that we definitely know that there's only one primary domain, the origin domain, but there are some propagation effects. So when we look at this, when we look at demand as our origin, our primary domain, there's some propagation to conversion. So we have a broken transition. Signal does not accumulate into consistent conversations. So the downstream effects of that are inconsistent pipeline, unstable inbound, revenue variability, unclear source performance, repeated channel switching, right? So you don't know which channel's contributing to what. When demand does not accumulate, conversion remains unstable. It inherits the instability. Now, signal dispersion is not solved by spreading visibility wider. Okay. The first shift is seeing whether your signal is concentrated enough to compound. You need concentration. Before adding more activity, the system needs a confirmation of where recognition is building, because that's where the conversations will start. So when we get to the fork in the road, so we can guess. You can guess increase channels, increase content, increase activity. Or you can confirm by seeing how your signal is being distributed across systems. So at this point, the question isn't, is something off? It's, can you actually see where it's coming from? That's what the crystallized reality map is designed for and reveals. If you're still sorting through kind of where this lands for you, then start with the snapshot and diagnose before you deploy.